All right, we are going to discuss the central nervous system. So I have a brain model in front of me, and we're going to be using pictures to discuss this brain. When we talk about the central nervous system is going to include the brain, which we're going to go in great detail on, and the spinal cord. So we're going to go through the anatomy of the brain and spinal cord. Now, there are some word roots that you're going to be using. Anytime you see the word cephalic, it means pertaining to the head. So one of the words that we talk about inside of the brain, this region right here, is going to be called the diencephalon. The word di means two, in means inside, so diencephalon, so inside of the head. Okay, cerebrum literally means brain. So the largest part of the brain is going to be the cerebrum, which is this portion. That's the cerebrum. Okay, the word ganglia means a swelling. So we're going to talk about the posterior ganglion on the spinal cord. The word meninge or meninge literally means membrane. So we're going to talk about meninges, the membranes that surround the spinal cord and brain. The word plex means interweaving. Spelled that wrong. Interweaving. And the word somatic always means body, like the somatic nervous system. So we do need to know the divisions of the central nervous system versus the peripheral nervous system, so we could actually do a review. So I'm going to turn my paper sideways. So when we talked about the nervous system, we did say that the nervous system was divided into the central nervous system. You've seen this picture before. The CNS is the brain and spinal cord, but we can also say it is divided into the peripheral nervous system, which is going to include your nerves, which come off of the brain and spinal cord. But your peripheral nervous system was broken into the somatic nervous system, which you still need to know. It is also broken down into the autonomic nervous system, which is chapter 14, and the enteric nervous system, which is going to include the gut. Now, the ANS is subdivided into the sympathetic nervous system. So all of this is going to be something that we talk about, and the parasympathetic nervous system. So we have a whole chapter dedicated to the autonomic nervous system, and the chapter that we're focusing on in this chapter is going to be over the central nervous system. So you should know your sensory neurons and then your effectors for each of your peripheral nervous system, but this chapter that we're covering is going to be over the central nervous system. Now, we could also review the functions of the nervous system. Again, the functions of the nervous system is going to be easily remembered by using the safety pin cycle. So you would draw your safety pin cycle. Step 1 is your receptor. The receptor is going to detect changes. Number 2 is your control center. Your control center is your central nervous center system. So that's the brain and spinal cord. And 3 is your effector. So we learned in the nervous tissue the different types of neurons. So this should all be review. Your receptor is going to act as a way to sense things. It detects sensations. So when we talked about detecting sensations, we talked about sensory neurons. Sensory neurons are also called ascending and afferent neurons. But when we talked about them functionally, they could be bipolar neurons or unipolar neurons. So when we talk about bipolar neurons are sensory neurons. These are going to be used for special senses. Special senses, there's always going to be 5 special senses. This will be one of the last chapters that we cover. It's going to be vision, hearing, equilibrium, smell, and taste. These are all going to be sensory neurons that are bipolar neurons. Now, when you say unipolar neurons are going to be associated with ganglias, which we're going to talk about today, but these are going to be used for general senses. General senses are going to be anything that is going to be senses of the body so that you can feel it from head to toe. So pain, tickle, pressure, vibration, etc. Touch, light touch versus deep touch. Temperature, that's a general sense. So general senses are basically body senses. When you say general senses, it's sensations that you can feel on your nose all the way down to your big toe. Special senses are always going to be confined to the head, and those are bipolar neurons, but these are sensory neurons. So we have general senses and we have special senses. Now we learned that the neurons located within the central nervous system are going to be called interneurons. Interneurons are multipolar. That's your interneuron. There are multipolar in shape, but interneurons are the only neurons found in the central nervous system. So when we talk about the brain and spinal cord, which is what we're talking about now, interneurons are going to be used for decision-making processes. So when we talk about interneurons, we're going to say the brain and spinal cord are going to interpret. Think interneurons interpret, integration. So they're going to interpret the sensory information being sent. So sensory neurons send the information. It has to interpret that. It has to integrate that. It has to plan. So anything that we're planning to do and monitoring the body. So it monitors information that is coming in. It is going to help you make decisions. I said that. So decision making. Okay, our brain is also going to help us maintain homeostasis. So we're going to talk about the area of the brain that does that. But it also is going to be all of your higher mental functions. Now, when you say higher mental functions, I'm going to write FXNs for functions. Higher mental functions. I'm going to turn this over because I'm running out of room. When you say higher mental functions, this is going to be your personality. So we're going to talk about where in the brain personality comes from. Being able to learn language, that's a higher mental function. Being able to learn. So learning and memory kind of go together. Emotion. Emotions are a higher mental function. Reasoning. Being able to decide if something is a good idea, to reason. All of these are higher mental functions. If you think about what makes you different from a dog can see a piece of meat that's been outside, it's rubbish, it's trash that has maggots, and a dog doesn't really have any reasoning as to why it shouldn't eat this, piece of meat that has maggots. A dog will eat it. So we can sit there and say, ooh, no, that's disgusting. That all is higher mental functions that we have. So all of this comes from the brain and spinal cord. So we're going to go through the different areas of the brain, and we're going to basically basically learn the anatomy and which areas of the brain are responsible for what. Okay, our last neuron that we've been talking about, the last function of the nervous system is to respond. And we respond through motor neurons. And motor neurons are multipolar. Motor neurons are going to be called descending neurons. And they're also called efferent neurons. And they're going to make muscles contract. These are the effectors that they control. And our muscles, there's 3 types. Smooth, so you should know the muscle types and which nervous system controls which is all review. There is cardiac, and there is skeletal. The second thing is gland control. When we talk about glands, motor neurons are going to cause our glands to secrete. So there's 3 functions of the nervous system. Our receptor is going to detect, and it sends information to the brain. The brain is going to integrate, interpret, plan, make decisions, maintain homeostasis based on the information it's receiving, and then sends out electrical impulses, which we call motor neurons, to our effectors, which are going to control muscle contraction and gland secretion. So those are the 3 functions of the nervous system that we learned in chapter 11. So we're going to now move to the brain. When we talk about the brain is the largest, most complex structure of the entire nervous system. We do break the brain into 4 divisions. This right here is called the cerebrum. This right here is called the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the second largest. So you have the cerebrum, which is the largest, the cerebellum, and these are mirror images. So if we were looking at the opposite hemisphere, you have your cerebrum and your cerebellum. And when we look at the inside is divided into the diencephalon on either side. So di means 2. In means inside, and then cephal means head. So your diencephalon is on the inside. If we were looking at a right cerebral hemisphere, this is your diencephalon. So we could say cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, so cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, which is all of this. And then you have your brain stem. So it starts right here and it ends here, brain stem. Those are your 4 divisions. So your 4 divisions are cerebrum, which is the largest, cerebellum, the second largest, the diencephalon, and then your brain stem. Cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, brain stem, and they are mirror images of each other. So when we talk about the brain is part of the central nervous system. We're going to be talking about everything, including these little depressions here or deep depressions here. So this is just a review of the brain using the model, but we're going to write it out. I'm going to start a new video, which is just going to cover the cerebrum, and then we'll have videos over the diencephalon and then over the brain stem so that you can watch little videos at a time. All right, the brain. It's the largest, most complex organ of the nervous system. It does have 4 divisions. The first one is the cerebrum. Second largest is cerebellum. Third largest is diencephalon, which is on the inside. And the 4th thing is the brain stem. Now, if asked what type of neurons are in the brain, you would always go back to your safety pin cycle. In the brain and spinal cord, there's interneurons. These are the only neurons in the brain and spinal cord, and these are multipolar. So all neurons inside of the brain are interneurons when you classify them functionally, but structurally they're multipolar. So we could say we have over 100 billion interneurons. They are classified as multipolar neurons. Now, part of the brain, when we talk about the brainstem, the brainstem is going to connect to the spinal cord, which is going to continue its way down through the vertebrae, through the vertebral foramen. So, the brainstem is going to continue right here as the spinal cord. It's going to exit the foramen magnum and it's going to become the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is going to travel in the vertebral foramen, which we call the vertebral canal. It's the same thing. So we will talk about the spinal cord as being a part of the central nervous system. And then another thing that we're going to cover as we go through are meninges. Now the word meninge is going to be membrane. So we're going to have a whole section dedicated to meninges. Membranes that cover the brain and spinal cord. So this is what you have to look forward to in all the videos.